Hi, hi, this is Mike making my video. Uh, Today's 3/31/2025, and it's roughly 5:45 p.m. So anyway, I'm making this video uh, to highlight, basically where I'm at with things. Uh, you know, uh, I talk a lot about manifestation. Uh, you know, and the things thereof. I talk about manifestation. I talk about um, being single in mind and single in purpose. And, that's being single pointed. And basically, it talks about, where you focus your energies, just before the manifestation takes place and you become single minded. And, you know, uh, being single minded is, it's not impossible to reach, but to, to get to the point where you have a boil off point where where the wave function collapses and you see a manifestation, where the windows of heaven open up and it gives you a blessing so big you can't contain it. In order for something like that to take place, it's nearly impossible. It's a very difficult thing to do. You have to go through a trial, and these trials, they represent themselves as basically a very difficult thing to do. Uh, you don't really know exactly what the outcome is going to be, but you do know that pretty much it's a nearly an impossible thing to do. Uh, so it's like you have radical acceptance. You embrace basically your weaknesses, and you you move forward, and it's almost like you have to have it's not to say that you have to. It is that you have to say that you have to have a certain mindset to enter in. Your mind has to be at a certain level, far beyond genius level, and you have to raise your energies, your vibrations to the point where they're so intense that you feel a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. And what happens is, during that point in time when you feel that way, uh, the wave function collapses eventually because you're single in mind and you have that focus. And it's focus and then fold, but your focus has to stay that way. And usually it involves sacrifice, a major sacrifice, giving up something that's very valuable to you. Like Cain and Abel, Cain gave a half offering and it was a very weak one, and he didn't receive anything. But then Abel gave a very good offering, and it's more or less the most valuable thing that he had, and he gave it up. And ultimately he was given a blessing that was far greater than Cain's. So with that being said, it's like sometimes you have the option to back out, but when you start the process, it's like when you go to plow a field, you don't look back, you just keep moving forward with it. It's like you get to the point where the wheels are set in motion, and there is no going back to go and collecting $200. There's Once the genie gets let out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. So it's kind of like you keep moving forward, but it's like the gateway, the heaven's gate. It's like sometimes people don't realize it, but sometimes it's got to cost you everything you have. It's got to be a perfect sacrifice. It's got to be everything. And that's kind of how It is. The universe is a very jealous universe, and it requires a perfect sacrifice. And so, anyway, with that being said, uh, it's almost like you have to have, the keys of knowledge, but you have to apply those keys, and you have to have the right mindset. You have to understand physics. You have to understand psychology and all that stuff to its fullest. And once you do, once you understand it, as far as any kind of reading would go, manifestation, you can read about that too as well. But the thing is you have to give up. You have to sacrifice, and you have to go without, and you have to basically struggle. And then when you do, your efforts won't be in vain. Your words won't come back to you void, and basically, what happens is, basically, the groundwork gets laid. The neural networks in your mind get laid, and they're basically there, and then they actually get activated, and you see colors that you normally wouldn't see. You hear beautiful sounds. Sometimes you hear people talking to you, and I've got ears to hear, that's for sure, and then I've got eyes to see. But it's almost like you have to be kind of touched by fire, and you basically have to have that fine madness. You have to have that precursor. That basically the stage has to be set, and you basically have to have inherited mental illness. But the mental illness actually can be exacerbated, and can be to the point where it's activated. And once it's activated, it doesn't go away. It keeps coming back. Your inheritance can't be taken away from you. So these things keep coming back and representing themselves. Like just recently, I had a major breakdown. I wouldn't say recently, but within the last 6 months. And I was hearing things that were pretty crazy. And I literally was so involved in it, I couldn't differentiate between a conversation I would have with somebody else versus being alone and hearing these voices. And so anyway, I've got schizoaffective bipolar type, and usually what happens is these things come to a summit, where they get to the point where they're expressed, and that only happens when I'm basically in the mindset, in the modality, where I can receive those types of things. So anyway, I've seen spirits, I've heard voices, and I've seen all kinds of incredible miracles. Could walk through walls and everything. Talk to people on the other side of glass, teleported people through a TV set. It just, the list goes on and on and on. But the thing is, you have to have, basically, it says prepared soil. You got to plant these seeds on prepared soil. So your mind has to be prepared. And, once it gets prepared, then what happens is all those seeds, all those ideas are subtle from the gross, grow, and they grow into something very large, and they manifest. So, you get to the point where you have eyes to see and ears to hear. The thing is, as you see, as you know, as people all know, that mental illnesses, like schizoaffective is one of the rarest mental illnesses that you can get, and I've got it. And the thing is that enables me to hear things and see things that most people can't see or hear. I'm not saying that, notwithstanding that it can't be done, but I've demonstrated stuff that I have shown people. But for the most part, it's a solitary thing, and you have to be alone to enter in. And that's kind of where I'm at, and you have to give up everything to the point where nothing can follow you. Your friends, your family, your job, anything that's associated with your ego. And you have to annihilate your ego and let your subconscious mind take over your creative side. And you let the creative side be powerful. But then when the creative side merges with the rational side and they become one mind. So that's what they mean by being single in point, single in purpose. So when you become one mind, you make the two into one, then what happens is, you could say to this mountain, move, and it will move. So when the two make peace in one household, they're talking about the two sides of your mind, the bride and the groom. So, I've got Sophia in my back pocket. I can summon her, which is basically my subconscious mind. And I can really enact her, and, I can do that. But, I kind of do it sparingly. I don't really jump in head first anymore. It's a very powerful thing. And, ultimately it's a powerful delusion. Everything is more or less just an illusion anyway. Even these solid objects in my room, they're an illusion. If I was to drive away, everything more or less just dissipates and disappears. As soon as I walk back in the room, the instant that I walk in, it seems like everything always was there. But if you pay close attention, you'll see that there's all kinds of little tiny things that assemble in front of your face. Little tiny things that assemble, and then you basically have the assemblage point. When you make contact with it with your eyes, then it becomes real. So anyway, there's people like Brian Hoffman, I think his name is, and there's all kinds of people that talk about that stuff. But honestly, you get to the point where you hit a ceiling, and there really isn't anything more left to do or be or have. You can get some satisfaction out of manifestations and stuff like that. As far as money. I can get involved with a woman, but I don't necessarily want to. And I could buy a house, probably, but I don't ever want to. It's a waste of money. I don't want to go back to school. That's a waste of money. And I have to cut corners. I have to live frugally. But the thing is, I've got all kinds of things, and I'm thankful for that. So anyway, I met God, and, the whole idea of God being in charge of the universe is kind of a misnomer. I mean, this guy was just a regular guy. He was very, big. He had white hair and blue eyes, and he was massive. Probably about 500-600 pounds. Well, probably 400 or 500 pounds. But anyway, he was massive and he was big. But anyway, he was very, very nice guy, friendly. But anyway, the whole thing is even God feels depression. And even, what if God was one of us, just a slob like one of us or whatever, on the stranger on the bus? He's just a regular guy, and it was, the whole thing is I decided that it's a force. It's an active force, that acts outside of my mind. And it's on the inside and the outside. The upper becomes like the lower, the inside becomes like the outside. As above, so below. And, my thoughts, they basically have an effect on things. I don't have to look at things all the time, but my thoughts do have an effect, and they come back to me. Sometimes I might be thinking about something. I might be single pointed and fixate on something, and then of course I'll go to the store or whatever, and there it is. So anyway, that's all I really have to say. I figured I'd make a little video. So anyway, have a nice day.